When work on the Nile's Aswan Dam began in 1960 in Egypt's southern reaches, Egyptians believed they were just about to mellow the world's longest river. Before the dam, the people's lives here were much worse. The water would rise and fall without predictability, said Abdullah Ati, a 42-year-old wheat and clover farmer in Kafr Al Sheikh's northern agricultural province, recounting his father's pre-dam stories. However, more than 50 years after Egypt's firebrand socialist president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, seized on fevered Egyptian nationalism to build the dam and establish the country's dominance over the Nile, this arid northern African nation is facing threats to its nearly only source of fresh water. With rapid population growth, limited agricultural land, and recent challenges to Egypt's major stake of Nile waters by upstream regions, the United Nations now predicts that Egypt will be water-stressed by 2025. In a sense, the average Egyptian is deprived of water, said Hani Raslan, a water policy expert at Cairo's government-affiliated Al-Haram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. The average per capita water use in Egypt is 700 cubic meters per year, while around the world it's about 1,000 cubic meters, he said. We are trying to find new sources of water, but soon there will be less than 500 cubic meters. Isn't it so that the Egyptians are inherently thirsty? Domestic freshwater consumption in local households accounts for less than 20% of Egypt's annual water consumption of 64 billion cubic meters, 55.5 billion of which comes from the Nile. The problem stems from Egypt's pressing need to feed its burgeoning population by expanding and irrigating the country's farmland, which accounts for only 6% of its total land area, with the same or even less water. Egypt's population is growing at an alarming rate. Since the 1990s, the growth rate has increased by 41%. To give you an idea of how quickly the population is growing, the Egyptian government reports that approximately 4,700 babies are born in Egypt each week. Egypt's population is currently estimated to be around 97 million people, with a potential increase to 151 million by 2050. Egypt ranks 13th in terms of population worldwide. Egypt's growing population will present unique challenges to the country's already scarce resources, stability in the country, and economy in the coming years. As a result, at the end of May, the Ministry of Social Solidarity launched an aggressive 2-year project called Second Kefya, or 2 Children is Enough, to reduce the number of children in Egypt, particularly in the most densely populated areas. Rapid population growth means increased water demand throughout the country, not to mention the Nile River as the primary source of water. A third of its water is lost due to the use of expensive electric power to pump low salinity drainage water into the Mediterranean Sea. Egypt will require 20% more water in 2020, according to the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. According to government projections, its population will grow from 80 million today to 98.7 million in 2025. Egypt has had substantial influence over Nile River water extraction since a colonial-era treaty guaranteed Egypt a 90% share of the river. This prevented neighboring countries from extracting Nile water without Egypt's permission. Egypt has lost control of the Nile over time, and countries such as Ethiopia are building dams along the river, which is a major concern for Egyptians, particularly during the dry season. Previously, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stated that Egypt's right to its Nile River water share was a matter of life or death. Today, Egypt's irrigation network is almost entirely dependent on Nasser's dam, known as the Aswan High Dam, which controls more than 18,000 miles of canals and subcanals that run alongside the Nile. According to irrigation experts, the system, despite its noble intentions, is highly inefficient. Surface irrigation of crops through canals, for example, results in up to 3 billion cubic meters of Nile water evaporating each year in Egypt's hot desert sun. According to Ahmed Al-Hanawi, professor of irrigation and soil sciences at Kafr Al Sheikh University, farmers located at canal heads have greater access to an ample supply of good quality water than farmers located at canal tails. The farmers, they take the water from the canal without any planning, Al-Hanawi said. Farmers in his village at the end of the canal are forced to irrigate their cotton, rice, and cornfields with runoff and even wastewater water from nearby farming hamlets. A lot of Egyptians don't realize we have a lot of water issues, said Sharif Hosni, CEO Shadoof, the German word for a simple agrarian tool used in some of ancient Egypt's initial gardens, a for-profit company. His company assists low-income families in establishing small gardens on Cairo's many rooftops using hydroponics, a method of growing plants without soil. According to Hosni, the irrigation method uses 20% less water than the current canal system. They see the Nile flowing, he said, and they think everything is fine. Having the Nile as the sole source of fresh water was once a boon to Egypt's rulers, allowing the pharaohs and subsequent governments to establish a centralized system of administration and infrastructure based on the river and its surrounding communities. To alleviate overcrowding near the Nile, Egypt's government is encouraging its swollen population to migrate away from the Nile and into the desert, which covers 95% of the country. The fertile Nile Delta north of Cairo is home to roughly half of Egypt's 80 million people. The government is offering low-cost tracts of sandy wasteland in exchange for settlers' promise to irrigate the barren parcels. The Egyptian government has increased tillable land by 1/4 in the last 50 years by using a canal system to deliver Nile water to the desert. However, the majority of those plots were purchased by commercial mega-farms that produce cash crops, such as strawberries, for trade rather than local consumption. In the end, these green desert farms did little to alleviate Egypt's food scarcity. Blooming the desert necessitates funds to construct modern irrigation systems capable of pumping water using energy-powered and pressurized pipes out of the Nile Valley. While it helps alleviate pressure on the Nile Delta, experts say the desert irrigation program only reduces Egypt's ability to conserve water. Think about Egypt as kind of a valley. Gravity suggests if you put too much water on your field in upper or southern Egypt, it trickles back into the Nile, and you can put it back on a field in lower Egypt, said Tutwiler, describing the flood irrigation system that originates at the Aswan Dam in the south. But if you take the water out of the valley and put it in the desert, it doesn't go back into the Nile. It's lost in the sand. Beyond the Nile River, the country only has a small number of internal renewable freshwater resources. Over 95% of the country's water resources originate outside its borders, with the Nile, which flows north into the country, accounting for roughly 90%. Egypt may face a water crisis as the effects of climate change worsen. Specifically, the country may experience a decrease in water quality due to saltwater inundation and a decrease in water quality due to hotter temperatures. By 2025, Egypt's figure is expected to fall to 500 cubic meters. That is without analyzing the implications of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which Egypt claims will lower water levels even further, though Ethiopia claims it has taken Egypt and Sudan's needs into account. The stakes are extremely high. The physical conflict between the countries along the Nile has subsided, but Egypt sees the dam as an imminent threat that could severely damage Egypt's agricultural and disrupt power supplies. Over 80% of its water is used for agriculture, but due to scarcity, Cairo already imports approximately half of its food and is the world's largest wheat importer. Farmers are being encouraged by the government to use more efficient irrigation and plant seeds with fairly short life cycles that require less water. It is also making an effort to recycle more water. Water management and irrigation schemes, however, have not reached everyone. We are still using old irrigation techniques, which use mud and soil and wastewater, said Aref Mohammed, a farmer near the southern city of Luxor. Climate change presents another problem in Egypt. With temperatures rising, Egypt could lose 30% of its food production in southern areas by 2040, according to the UN World Food Program. Heat waves have already reduced crop productivity, and in Fayum, residents say temperatures have been rising for years, forcing farmers to use more water for less land. We have not got any produce from this land over the past 3 years because of the temperature levels, said another farmer in Fayum, asking not to be named. Now, if I have 2 fedans, or 2.1 acres, I will plant one and leave the other one. The effect of climate change on upstream nations is uncertain. It is unclear whether there will be an increase or decrease of rainfall in countries of the Nile source, said Tahini Mostafa Salit of Egypt's Water Resources and Irrigation Ministry. As such, we don't know whether to adjust our politics based on an increase or a decrease of resources. But any alteration to Nile flows could make a huge difference, said Randa Abul Hassan of the UN Development Agency, UNDP. Every 2% drop of water affects 1 million people, she said. So what will happen to Egypt now? Egypt has already passed the internationally defined threshold for water scarcity and edges dangerously close to absolute water scarcity, defined by the United Nations as less than 500 cubic meters of water per person per year. Estimates place Egypt's current water resources at 560 cubic meters per person per year. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has recently revealed that his country has reached the stage of water poverty with less than 500 cubic meters of water per capita per year. Speaking to foreign reporters on the sidelines of the World Youth Forum's 4th edition in Sharm El Sheikh on January 13th, Sisi noted that the global water level is set at 1,000 cubic meters per capita per year. On the Ethiopian highlands amounts to 900 billion cubic meters, which means that Egypt's and Sudan's shares do not exceed 10% of the rainfall in Ethiopia. Mohammed Nasser al-Din Alam, a former Egyptian irrigation minister, told Al Monitor that water poverty, as defined by the World Bank, is when a country's renewable internal freshwater resources per capita are less than 1,000 cubic meters annually, which is the minimum rate to meet the citizens' need of water and food. He noted that since 1991, Egyptians have been living with less than the minimum water share. For 30 years, we have been suffering from water poverty and from a food gap because we produce less than we consume, which prompts us to import some food crops, especially those that we cannot grow due to a lack of sufficient water, Alam explained. The per capita share of water in Egypt now ranges between 550 and 560 cubic meters per year. Meanwhile, Egypt's annual share of water has been stable despite the population growth, with 55.5 cubic meters from the Nile water and 3.5 billion cubic meters from rain and groundwater. This means that Egypt's overall annual share of water amounts to 60 billion cubic meters, while the country needs 114 billion cubic meters per year. Thus, our annual water deficit stands at 54 billion cubic meters, he said. Alam added, therefore comprising Egypt's share of the Nile water is a red line and is not acceptable. We are currently unable to expand our industries due to the lack of the necessary water. The state's water projects are just a means to mitigate the effects of water poverty, but do not serve as a drastic solution to the problem. Egypt is not ready and will not allow this major problem to continue because of Ethiopia's unilateral actions regarding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, crisis, he added. On the 20th of January, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed shared a statement on his Twitter account, calling on Egypt and Sudan to change their discourse on the GERD crisis. Ethiopia has the ambition to build a modern economy based on agriculture, manufacturing, and industry. It is committed to developing social infrastructure with quality education, health systems, and the provision of clean water for its people. Electricity is a basic infrastructure lacking in Ethiopia, and over 53% of my fellow citizens, or about 60 million people, do not have access, the statement read. Commenting on Ahmed's statement, Alam said, Cairo welcomes any call for peace and the resumption of negotiations on the GERD. Egypt does not object to Ethiopia building the dam, but we want to reach a binding legal agreement in relation to the mechanisms of operating the dam. He stressed that Egypt does not seek any benefits from the GERD, saying that Cairo is ready to assist in Addis Ababa's development and optimize its investments, providing that a binding agreement is reached. Alam is expected to see a resumption of negotiations in the coming period. Mohammed al-Orabi, member of the Egyptian parliament and former foreign minister, told Al Monitor, Egyptian senior officials have officially confirmed that Egypt has reached a stage of water poverty. The state is undertaking many water projects to alleviate the ongoing risks of water poverty on the country's development. He stressed that Sisi's latest address to reporters was a message to the international community that the situation is dangerous and not mere propaganda or allegations against anyone, and the international community ought to assume its responsibility to protect Egypt against the dangers of water poverty. Ahmed's statement is political and far from establishing a practical and legal framework to solving the problem over the GERD. He feels somewhat relieved after having controlled the crisis at home and achieved some gains in the Tigray region. He also sees that Sudan is going through difficult conditions internally, and that it has been a year since the African Union has been under Congo's presidency, and nothing has materialized yet, Orabi noted. He said, Ahmed came out with this political statement that is devoid of any pledge or commitment to the existing tripartite administration to operate the dam, which is what Egypt and Sudan have been calling for. I think his statement was merely a message to the international community that his country is now witnessing stability at home. Abbas Sharaki, professor of geology and water resources at Cairo University, told Al Monitor, Egypt has indeed been in a stage of water poverty for more than 30 years now, which is due to the fact that the country's share of the Nile water has been limited since construction on the GERD began. Egypt's annual water share is estimated at about 60 billion cubic meters. Meanwhile, the population has been increasing. He said the annual water flow from the Nile is estimated at an average of 84 billion cubic meters of water. Given its population density, Egypt gets 55.5 billion cubic meters of water per year from this share, while Sudan's share is 18.5 billion. There are also 10 billion cubic meters that are lost because of evaporation. Sharaki explained, with this, Egypt's annual per capita share stands at 550 cubic meters. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's per capita share reaches thousands of cubic meters given the country's abundance of rain, with the average rainfall rate in the Ethiopian highlands amounting to more or less than 936 billion cubic meters per year. Egypt and Sudan receive less than 10% of Ethiopia's rainwater. According to Sharaki, 80% of Egypt's water share is dedicated to agriculture. This is why the Egyptian government has been establishing several water projects to optimize the use and reuse of water in a bid to meet the Egyptians' needs of water and food, he said. Egypt has been establishing aqueducts and inaugurating many water wells to make use of groundwater for irrigation and agriculture, as well as projects for water treatment plants, he said. Sharaki noted that the government has also established many desalination plants to provide drinking water to residents of new cities located far from the Nile River, as well as to increase crop productivity. For example, in the past, an acre of rice field produced 2 tons of rice, as opposed to 4 tons today. Also, we are no longer dependent on sugarcane to produce sugar. We introduced the sugar beet crop, which consumes less water. All of these projects are designed to meet the citizens' need for water and food amid water poverty, and Egypt's unchanging water share and increasing population, he said. Every water drop stored behind the GERD is from Egypt's share, which is also not enough to meet the citizens' need for water and food. Some 8 billion cubic meters of water have been so far stored in the dam, Shariki said, stressing that Addis Ababa was not successful in generating electricity from the dam yet. Egypt is a beautiful and ever-growing community and has been extremely significant historically. However, with its graph going consistently down in terms of ecological balance and water scarcity, it's in a face of a crisis that needs to be immediately handled, or else the consequences might prove too dire. What are your opinions on this? How do you think Egypt can handle its water scarcity and make the best of the situation? Do let us know in the comments section below. If you liked the video, do give us a thumbs up and share the video with your friends and family. We keep coming up with such informative and interesting videos time and again, so make sure you subscribe to our channel. And also don't forget to hit the bell icon below. This way you'd never miss out on anything new that we come up with.